he knows that this session is
Great. So we're going to start the next session. Andy Gross is here, going to talk about data analysis and visualization.
Yeah, this is more of a discussion than a presentation, basically. So
there's no live video.
There is.
Okay.
It's on here. So this all started with ExoVis. It's basically Martin Bluehost started it to show funders and administrators basically how the laptops were being used and that they were being used. This has nothing to do yet with individual, this is not a tool for teachers necessarily to tell them how well their students are doing or which students need more support than they're currently getting and these kind of things. But this is where I personally would like to get to. Lionel has also alluded to that they are thinking about it, which means like going from a more project approach to a more student-centered view of the data, but which is currently not existing because A, there has not been a debate what that means in terms of privacy for the students, for example, and B, nobody has talked to the teachers what they would like to see. So this discussion, this is how to get your input of what you would think, what would be valuable as people who have started projects, what they would like to see or have heard that the teachers said they would like to see. So in its current state, this is a test installation of ExoVis with data from Ole Nepal, an OLPC project, multiple OLPC deployments in Nepal. So the name of the deployment is here on top. The data is stored in a Couch DB, which is a non-structured document-based database that is very fast. And it syncs automatically. So you can set it up in such a way that if you collect data in the field offline, you come back online and it syncs. You can sync the data into the Couch. So here, what you see is the number. So for this deployment, in this case, it's Coral. You see which activity has been used, how often, based on the backups. You can see there's a long tail. All these kind of things need to be made more interactive in that you can choose like a more narrow range. You can cut off the tail, these kind of things. So you see that they heavily base their education on ePath and Pustakalaya XL, which is another group of, I think it's an activity that is Flash-based, where they do a lot of activities inside Flash. So this is all hidden behind this one icon, basically, but there's a lot of other things that go on behind that. The number of files that were produced by which activity. So Pustakalayo produces a lot of files. At which time of the day these activities have been used. So ePath is mostly active like here around noon. There's another issue with like synchronizing date timestamps out of these because the Exo clocks, sometimes the battery on the BIOS on the motherboard runs out and they don't keep time accurately and stuff like that. There's a lot of data scrubbing that needs to happen to put any kind of trust into these date times, and at which date these have been active. And so you can see that they're clear, that there's a school break and stuff like that. And you can also go to the other activity, the other projects. They have slightly different distributions, but the pattern is pretty much similar. That ePath is the most commonly used one, but they have a different. This one here, the laptops in this project were used differently, maybe because a teacher fell ill or changed, or like there's so many factors that we don't know about. And again, this says nothing about individual students. Right? This is not a tool for teachers. This is a tool for administrators to show, hey, these, like, if you want to raise money, you can show, hey, these laptops have been active. And from the results, eventually after the year, you can say, hey, it could have a positive impact or not. So what I would like this to take it, like to take a different direction, more into like doing this for teachers, making this into a tool for teachers. But for this, there's a lot of things that need to happen first. We need to know exactly what the use cases for the teachers would be. Like, what does a teacher actually want to know about? B, the way the logging currently happens would have to change, such that it becomes a student-centered thing. If a student logs in, this student's activity. It's not currently, it's laptop based. Like, it's this serial number that produced these kind of logs. It is unclear that which student logged in at which time, right? So there's the student names or IDs or whatever other identifier do not appear in any of the logs. And then once you have like identifier for students, you have to be very careful about privacy and other issues that may play a role in there. So this is another discussion to be had that is more complicated. But as long as we can give, like during ingest time, for example, you could give every user ID that you see or username, you could give a unique ID and then strip away the username. So it's ID based, it's not student name based. And then the teacher, there should be a tool for the teacher to match that back, so that the teacher, once the teacher sees that ID, knows, hey, we can map this back to the student name and say, hey, this is the student. But once you pass the data on, the student name will not be passed on. It will be the ID that will be passed on, that gets visualized. For example, that would be one way of ensuring, at least in part, the student's privacy, that is maintained. Yeah, and so this is more like an idea gathering kind of thing. So we have people in the room that have written activities, know how the logging works and how like the journal works and these kind of things. So anything that you can think of that would put this more on the path of getting to a student-centered view would be helpful.
So what kind of decisions or what kind of, are these metrics driving? What's the idea? So
currently, these, like in its current state, is a tool for administrators and funders to sort of justify the investment, saying, hey, we've spent this money on, this is how the laptops are being used, and the laptops are actually being used. So it's more like a showcase or like a control mechanism for the administrator to say, hey, we've paid for these laptops, but now we don't see that they're active, or we see that they're actually being used.
Yeah, I guess. So I guess with more analytics across different geographies, you can make your benchmarks. You can start deriving benchmarks so that like if it's below 100 or like the number of files there, or the number of sites visited. So I'm just kind of trying to extrapolate this into how this is going to drive the popularity of a program or the usage of the device and this other workflow kind of things, right?
Yeah, so currently the use case for administrators and funders is pretty clear. The use case for using this as a tool for teachers is not clear. Right. Samir?
No, I mean, it's not like strictly related to it being a tool for teacher. I was just curious if you can use this data, like I'm not sure, like if you can propagate it back to the client, for instance, to make smarter decisions about what to present to the user. Like that would be one way that some data is utilized. Like if some people like always use a particular activity, and then maybe you want to make that more accessible or more front and center, or maybe actually the teacher or an educator would like other people people to use another activity. So then that's the question of why aren't they not using that activity, and then maybe you can make decisions based on that data. But I was just wondering if the data flows back into the system at the moment or not.
I don't know, how's Olel and Paul using the data?
Well, it doesn't flow back into the devices, as in it's basically available through the web, and so you would segment out the pieces of it, and so like when we were collecting some profiles for use cases, like Andy said, the use case for an agency that supports this, funds it, that's pretty clear because they need yearly reporting, all that stuff. In Jamaica, when we talk to the schools, the use case for the administrators, the principals and so on, was also fairly clear because like the principals would say, we are more interested in the logistics of the project, as in how many laptops show up on the network every day, and some details about the software provisioning and those kinds of things, because that's again a reporting feature for them to then send.
It's like an aggregate. Yeah.
Right, they're not looking at a specific thing.
Yeah.
In talking to the teachers in Jamaica, they said, I'm not very concerned about the other classes because I don't teach them. But I am concerned about my own class and my own students. And at that point, it was almost they were ambivalent about, do I want it on a specific, student basis, or I'm still okay with an acronym. And I think that probably goes back to more pedagogical things, which is, let's say I am able to pinpoint the data for a specific student. Well, then do we have enough time and space to then go back and work with that one child? And in many of the schools that we've worked with, we've seen when they can barely get through the school day, and so they're not going to do a one-to-one. So then they're like, just give me a general picture of what do the kids do. So in this one particular case where we got here from Jamaica, we saw that the children would always talk about a specific program, a specific application from here called TuxMath. And nobody would believe them because they're like, why would they want a math activity? They should be doing pictures, videos, or something else. The data did come back and show that that's the most popular activity. And then, of course, after looking at it and looking at it in detail, it turns out, well, it is a popular activity because it is a math thing, but it's a game where a penguin blows up things, and so there's a certain lure there. And we also found some correlation, which is that cohort actually did quite well with math in that particular year, but there are other reasons that could have led to that as well. So it feels like, at least based on what we were able to gather, that there are three categories. There is the funding agency category, right?
Yeah.
There is the administrator category, we're interested in logistics, and then there is the teacher category with pedagogy and so on. I think those are the ones we could discern. Now there's also the parents. They would like to know what's happening, but whether they will actually go into something like this and look at the detail, because they are again interested in their own kid, not everybody at school. So, and in fact, in Sugar there is an activity, I forget the name of it. You remember the one that pulls the journal out?
Portfolio.
The portfolio. It basically gives you a little pie chart of that particular kid's laptop, like what they've been doing. But like Andy said, it's on a laptop basis, so if two kids were sharing the laptop, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But other than that, there is that individual level view available.
So the whole thing is contingent, your next phase or your next step is contingent on having some sort of level on top of Sugarizer where you log in as a user. And that's really, you're dependent on Lionel implementing that for you to then be able to follow your next step, aren't you?
Yeah, but you could when you each laptop you provide a name, right? To the is that
laptop gets.
the laptop that gets the name, or is the kid that?
There is an SSID, SHT number.
Yeah.
That is the identity for that laptop, and any number of students that use that laptop all have the same
Oh, they have the same key, right?
key.
The laptop.
So the fundamental thing, I think, is if you want individual tracking of kids, then we're gonna have to change. This is what has Tony has been saying all along, is that we need to rewrite the logon sequence for XOs. But then on the other hand, XOs are going out of business. You have to decide which hardware you're going to be on, because it could be on an Ubuntu thing, and you might have a logon that is not SSH key dependent, but actually person dependent.
Yeah.
And then you'd probably have to have the ability to log a student on any of the replaceable laptops. So this is another.
Yeah, it's an ID management thing then suddenly. Yeah. So
Where can I start?
anywhere.
The most interesting new thing is I went to the All Things Open conference in Raleigh. Raleigh happens to be the headquarters of Fedora, so it's a live community. But they have a piece of software called Free IPA.
Free IPA.
And this is
Sounds like
an
beer.
authentication, open source authentication package. But the point of this one is that it allows you to set up a single repository for names and passwords.
Yeah.
That then can be used by every activity. And our problem on the school server is that we have Moodle that requires a sign-in, and we have Khan Academy, which has a different sign-in, and then if you put in OwnCloud, there's a different sign-in.
So could you use Free IPA as an OAuth?
And so the idea is let the school put in the usernames and passwords because they have to have a roster of their students.
Yeah.
And then have the system recognize at the beginning of the session, have the kid type in his username and password. And then they should never have to do that again. They should just automatically be logged in. So I'm going to take a look at that. It's like so many packages. You look at it when the beginning, it looks like the answer to the problem. And then you find out, well,
Yeah, there are
have to
issues
solve
with
a few
that.
other
Yes.
million problems.
Yeah.
But just back to this thing. One of the things they did to support this was they changed Sugar so that now when you first install Sugar, they ask you your gender and age, in addition to the nick and the colors. Well, unfortunately, the people who do this thing are nowhere near being any users. They don't know what users are doing. So a school, when we get the laptops, we have to configure these laptops before school starts. So we have absolutely no idea who the user of this laptop is going to be. But that's the only time you ever get asked, right? So typically what we do in Rwanda is the NIC, the name that goes with the laptop, is a serial number that's also written with magic marker on the outside. And it might be something like ESJ007. And it has nothing to do with the serial number, other than there's a one-to-one correlation, but we want something that the kids can recognize, and a 13-digit ID number is not in that category. Plus, if they wanted to find it out, they have to take the battery out, which if you're running the laptop is a bit disruptive, right? So, and then when you have it in a charger, the kids need to see which is their laptop when they go to take it out of the charger, so you want to put it here, or in some cases we've used, tape to tape the ID here. So the ID itself, but the way the software is written is one laptop per child. Therefore, it's obvious there's a one-to-one correlation between serial numbers and names.
Yeah.
Well, of course that's true, but it's not, right?
Yeah, not in most cases.
No, and now if you get Sugar that's not on an XO, there is a username and password because they're using the Unix username and password. The Unix username on this machine is OLPC. And you could have 25 users, but they're all OLPC. That's it. Right? And so I've said for years now that what we need to do is to come up with a method whereby users can identify themselves. Well, originally Sugar was not a desktop. It was very explicit. We aren't going to go that way, right? Today, by definition of the vision statement, Sugar is a desktop, right, under Fedora, right? So we've gone away from that model. So I don't know why login should be such a big issue, but if you get SOAS or you get Sugar on Ubuntu, they're using the Linux username. So each user has a different, but then they have a different set of files. Well, if you know Unix or Sugar, you know all of the activities are in /home/oldpc/activities, which would imply if you have multiple Linux users, you have multiple copies of the whole set of activities. You can't afford that. So what they do on the Ubuntu version is those activities are in user live share activities. So in other words, they're in a common file system that's belonging to all the users. But if you install an activity, it gets installed in your /home/oldpc/activities, and it's not available to anyone else on the laptop. Now, how deployments are going to manage that, I have no idea, but that's how that works. Now, Sugarizer would probably need to find out how Sugarizer
Yeah.
is going down on this path.
Yes.
Because they haven't looked at that issue yet either.
But I think they need some way of identifying people because they enable sharing. And so they need to ID at least.
Well, it
different
runs
users.
ultimately under Android, which means that how did you get on Android if you didn't log in?
Yep.
So,
But Androids generally, at least the phones, are a single user system, I think.
It's not, Android can have multiple users.
Yeah.
I guess if you
But
launch
there's-
an app,
You
then.
can set it like you can with Linux, you can set it by default. Right? It's the single user
So
system.
my phone has to be a multi-user system.
Yeah, you have to log in with your Google account, but as soon as you switch users, you get like the new user gets all his contacts and stuff imported.
So one advantage of free IPA incidentally is it's on the server, it's not on the laptops. So in other
So
words,
it's an
if you need
IP
to get a
provider.
resource from the server, you have to have them logged in as a server session. And that's where you really want it to be.
Yeah. We want all this management to happen somewhere central.
Yeah, but this thing is still involved with the registration issue because basically, depending on how you do it, but in general, you're backing up the school server. And so what we were doing is we were getting these statistics by looking at the backup. Because it was on the school server, you could get to all of them from one place.
Yeah, there's an
But
import
only if they're
script for this
registered,
from
otherwise they
the
don't get
server that backs it, that
Yeah.
ingests it into the
So there's a
database.
whole lot of slips between the cup and the lip.
Oh,
Yeah.
in one of the schools in India, just a cumbersome manual process where when the laptop goes to another child, they know the serial number is from say 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock is with another child. So it's a combination of.
Oh, they log that. Okay, wow.
But it's manual and it's cumbersome.
Oh, yeah, it's very
At least
cumbersome.
you know whose work is with who, but it's.
Yeah.
a lot of work.
But so to get back to Samir's point that it's difficult for teachers to deal with individual students, but it could be used, for example, to establish like a common baseline. What's the base knowledge of the class? Let's say, what is the least level that they got to, and then try to build on that.
I was just, I mean, to comment on that, like, do you go one level deeper than just the activity? Like, do you collect events or, things that happen inside? Let's say I launch an academy, and then, like, do you collect metrics for the videos that are launched, for instance?
No,
Is that possible?
Tony, I think
Itself.
they do it, but you told me about another thing where somebody hacked an activity or like such that you could track how far a user got or when they stopped, right? What was it? Yeah.
I'm trying to emulate the Khan Academy coach report.
Yeah. Oh, it's called Coach
But
Report.
to do this, what I have to do is modify the sugar. A sugar activity is embedded in a full Python program. And that Python program is activity.py. And so to get common information recorded with the journal saving, you have to really go into that program. And so it's the one that actually saves the metadata. And so I had to go and do that because I needed to save the username, the start time, the finish time, the activity that we're running. And I give them a check mark. So when the student is running an activity, if they did what the teacher asked them to do, they could say, check, I did it. So self-scoring, but that's the simplest way to get it done. And then if the teacher wants more than that, then we can figure out on that activity. And then that gets recorded in the metadata for the journal entry. And so when the journal gets backed up, then that data is in the metadata and it's available.
Is that example somewhere available where you've done that?
I have backups from a couple of different years of everybody, but
No, not the data, how you change the activity. Activity
oh,
to high.
yeah, I got that.
Okay.
It's not on GitHub because it wouldn't have been accepted, but that's another story. But see, another problem is the word activity. Activity is synonymous with programming in sugar, but it's not, okay? You could put up the right activity and say 50% of the kids are doing their time on the right activity. That tells you absolutely nothing about what they were doing. In other words, the activity is what they do with the right activity. It's not the fact that they were running the right activity. So you look at the journal and you see 27 of this activity and 10 of this activity, but it doesn't give you any information about what that person was doing. And the worst part of it is the name of the file they're saving is the name of the activity. It's right activity. They might as well have called it untitled. It means exactly the same thing. So one of the things that the GOC student did this summer, which hasn't yet been put in Sugar, is we have a save as function. So now when you close an activity, it asks you, what is the name of the file that you're going to save? And you type that in and say go. And now when you go to look at the journal, all of the entries have useful names. It'll say, report on election, or, history of Haiti, or whatever the report was they were doing is the title. And now the kid themselves, when they look at the journal, they see 27 right activities, which is the one they want to resume.
Yeah.
Right? But if they put their name on it, then they know, oh yeah, that's the one I want to go back and fix, right? And why Sugar hasn't done this for 8 years, I have no clue, but they haven't, and they still haven't. But that's the kind of statistic you really want to know, and what the teacher really wants to know is what was the kid doing, right? Not just what activity were they running, but so it's really hard.
Yeah. This is why we're having this conversation. Yeah.
Useful statistic. I mean, it's easy enough to capture data. It's easy enough to scan it and filter it.
Yeah.
But to get meaningful information out of it, and it depends very much on who wants the information.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm trying
Funding
to.
agencies easy. All they want to know is how much time. Right.
That's why we started.
Samir, you wanted to say
Yeah,
something?
sure.
I was gonna say, I think overall there are probably 3 slightly different approaches. So one is every sugar activity has some representation in the data store in the journal.
Yeah.
And so this approach that we have here is essentially looking at that journal and trying to figure out what's happening there. And it doesn't have a lot of detail about what happened within that activity, but it's standing right now as a proxy. There is another system called the Sugar Network, which was written by another group, where they actually do, it's almost like looking at the subsystems, so keyboard, mouse, network, that level of activity that you were indicating. So that actually collects that, and it has a database, like an RRD type database, and you can go through and you will get an idea of, when somebody clicked on the mouse and when they opened this and that, all that, a lot of detail. But again, it's not giving you a window inside that particular application. It's still a keyboard mouse level, activity. So then you have to sort of look at that and say, what can this be as a proxy for eventually learning, which is what we're trying to sort out, right?
Yeah.
The third approach, which I think has been done on a couple of applications, activities in Sugar, is what happens with it, which is to make the journal metadata richer by actually trying to figure out that when they started, say, what did they put in keywords or whatever that may be, but that is on a per activity basis as opposed to a common framework across the board that can collect stuff. So in some ways, it's like no matter which approach you look at, they all collect data only to a certain extent, and the gap that remains has to be, it's like if I get enough correlation, I'm happy with it kind of thing. I don't want 100%, I don't want 90%, 72% is okay, because it gets me through, right?
It is also strongly curriculum dependent, right? If everything is completely unstructured and completely free, it's unclear how far a student should have gone, right? Or what they should have achieved. So then it's really up to the teacher to decide, like based on the results that they've seen, like looking over the shoulder or looking at, I don't know what else they can do if not the state of their activity is being saved, right?
So in fact, some of this goes back to, these were my conversations with folks in OPC and Sugar later on. Some of this goes back to why such systems were not a part of the infrastructure. And that has to do with the fact that when you're looking at constructivist learning and constructionism and all that, you're not looking at this data, you're actually sitting down and looking at the kid and seeing what did they do, right? Except that the scalability of that is
Yeah, exactly.
very, very difficult with 1,500 kids as opposed to looking at one.
Yeah.
Right? And so in the early days, my conversations with people at OPC would basically come to this thing where they would say, well, we're not really looking at this kind of massive data, we're looking at observing the kid and what the kid does, right? And so I think right there is a conflict of how the approach should be implemented, especially if your project is large.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to get that.
So yeah, this doesn't really align with a constructivist kind of way of learning necessarily, but it could, right?
But think about this, at this university, how many faculty or administrative people want to know how much computer time their students spend? Right? There isn't anybody who cares how long it took the student to get that report finished.
Yeah.
And I think that's the model that really for OPC is this, the teacher's going to look at the product. And evaluate the product. Via the report. I've talked to 2 or 3 teachers in Germany and elsewhere that are using Raspberry Pi in a lab in a grammar school. And they said, okay, the only things we have the kids do are write. They come into the computer lab and they have a project to write something. And that's the only activity we use. Well, that's another thing with Sugar is depending on the teacher controls the use of the laptop and all the time it's used. And so the activities that are being run are the way the teacher said, this is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And in my case, my experience has been the only activities you would see up there are the ones that were taught to them in the workshop that they're actually using. All the rest of them are up in,
This is why here EPATH and Pustakalaya Excel are the ones that are massively used, and all the others are used probably as a sidetrack.
And of course, if they're using the GNOME side, and for example, Kishwar in Pakistan, her students tend to use the GNOME side instead of Sugar because it looks more like Windows. You get enough statistics because that's that's over there.
Sugar Network will grab it. Sugar Network will grab it, GNOME side statistics.
Yeah, it'll do GNOME, Sugar, and all of it.
Adam.
So maybe this is cheating, but can I ask a question to you instead? So my view is those 4 things you've written on the top.
Funding agency. Yeah.
Administrator is threatened by the funding agency because they don't fall into line. They'll lose their funding. The principal will lose their job. The teacher is threatened by the principal because if they don't fall into line for what the principal wants them to do, the parents, and the teachers and the kids, they each have this data could harm them. So you can call it privacy or confidentiality, whatever you want to call it, but data could directly harm those people. You're gathering the data. So gathering data directly confronts this utopian constructionist view where people should build whatever they want. So my question to throw it back to you is, I think those things are in direct conflict. And so how do you gather data that is less threatening to any one of those relationships between funding agency and administrator? Say, oh, I want all the data, but I'm not going to threaten you with the data.
Yeah, but
how do you set up that
this relationship exists no matter whether or not we collect data or not, right? So the funding agency is always in some conflictuous relationship with the administrator.
I think it's a fair question. Look at a teachers union. The labor union for teachers will not allow you to gather data. If you don't build a rapport with that teachers union, you will never gather data. So the onus is on you to set up that data gathering that respects their values and their 100-year history. If you don't take that seriously, you are never going in, period. So I think it's a very serious question. And at any level, you are threatening the long-standing relationship that's been there for 100 years. You're immediately threatening them. If you don't take that seriously, you will not be invited in.
Yeah, so for this, there is strong demand apparently for ExoVis for this kind of visualization coming from administrators and from the funders, basically, from the people who run projects who need to show how the laptops are being used. there is currently no demand for, or that we know of turning, like collecting data in terms of supporting teachers, right? This is like, we're trying to make this into a tool for a teacher, not something that can be used against the teacher. And so
the question is how you do that. So, I mean, there's a story in Boston where I live that they're trying to get the teachers more comfortable with someone else in the room. And how do they achieve that? And so you have to, it's like the whatever Simon and Garfunkel song. We're here to, watch over you to protect yourself. And, well, once you get that buy-in, then it moves forward, right? But initially, there's very strong resistance there. The teacher might see, oh, this is very useful to see that the stats are comparing me to the other classrooms. But until they understand that, they're very much threatened by that data.
Yeah, without buy-in from the teachers, it will never work anyway. So this is why that is whole other conversation that needs to happen.
Again, I'm not too sure we're in touch with reality here. In fact, at least in Nepal and in Rwanda, the Ministry of Education requires statistics from the school. Incredible detail. How many textbooks do you have? Which version of the textbooks were they? Attendance for the teachers, attendance for the students, on and on and on. And then they publish annual statistics and they show this and that and the other thing. In the US, the same. My sense is the central administrators education are going to require any information that can be supplied digitally, right? So the amount of information they're requiring from the schools now has got to be 2 orders of magnitude more than they did 30 years ago because they have the ability to supply it. And so I don't know that the teachers have a vote in this. I think they have to just comply. So this kind of information, at least in the schools that I'm involved with, they don't even know it's being collected. Now in Rwanda, and I happened to be in Rwanda when they were doing this, it was the World Food Program that was the issue. Because they wanted the World Food Program local office wanted to have the ability to go to the central UN and show that the money being invested in these laptops was in fact producing some activity that they could show there was something going on. And so there wasn't threatening anybody really. And even the pressure on them as a funding agency wasn't all that hard, but they just didn't want to have to go and say, well, we really don't know, but the kids are using them, right? They wanted to have something more numerical as a way to present that information.
You had something.
I don't think, I don't think necessarily tracking the teacher, you're just providing the tool for the teacher to assess what's happening in the classroom or with the tool.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I saw, I think, forget what school district, but there was like real-time analytics on as students were progressing keystrokes and keyboard stuff as they're going through. So the teacher can walk around the room and saying, these students are more engaged rather than other, and kind of focus on the student who wasn't so engaged and seeing if they were having trouble or issues, just navigating through it. But it's real-time data that was in the classroom. They can look, kind of get that information of keystrokes or how much time they were doing completing a task compared to the other number of students in the classroom.
Unfortunately, the situation in areas that we deploy, which are areas that don't have internet and don't have much computer experience. As an example, in the classroom, all the kids want their back to the wall. So they'll move the desks around, so their desks are typically 3 kids to a desk. They're all against the wall. And then I have to say to the teachers, if you want to see what the kids are doing, you've got to get them out in the middle of the room. You've got to tell them to bring their desks out, and we try to get them so that they're facing each other. You've got 2 desks like this, 3 on this side and 3 on this side, because the teacher can then walk behind and see who's having trouble. But then the teachers don't know that much more about the computers anyway. So they're not, you remember the web movie where all these kids were gathered around the laptop? That's the model. This is not collaboration by technology at a distance. This is, how did you do that? Oh, I see, okay, I'll go back to my machine and try it. And luckily in those schools, they don't have in an American school, that would be disruption in the classroom and the kids would be, timeouts and all that stuff because they left their seat without permission and so on. That's not an issue in those countries. The kids can go where they need to go and do what they need to do. And that model that's how it works. And then you say, okay, well, who did the work, right? And as Waller typically says, plagiarism is only of interest in the schools. Well, it's not interest in those schools. However the job got done, that's the way it should be, and they do it.
So why do they want their backs to the wall? Why do those children want their backs to the wall?
They want their backs to the wall, so they're away from the teachers, right? And the teacher's talking from in front, like the lecture hall, right? And so, how many, when Samir, when you give a class, how many times is the front row of seats taken?
Oh, the classes are full.
Every time I went into the classroom, when there was less than full, the front 2 rows or 3 rows were empty. Nobody wanted to be close to the teacher.
No, but you specifically said that they move their desks so their backs are against the wall. That's different than the phenomenon.
Yeah, but
Nobody wanted to sit in the front.
I can't speak to the culture, but that's, you can see it.
Really?
And they get them to move out away from the wall, and the next time you turn around, they're back to the wall.
I would say, obviously, depending on where you go, there will be differences in what they want to do or what they're allowed to do and so on. But I would say, at least if, we have tools to address a fair number of use cases, somewhere, where we have at least, evidence for some of these, there is a starting point.
Yeah, exactly.
And
then you can start the conversation.
Right, so, in one of the papers that we wrote, about this, the methodology was, okay, you have this data, but this is not really the thing that we are starting with. So in fact, what we would do is the starting point would be that you interview the people in the community, right? And that's a 5-minute, 10-minute conversation. What do you do with the computer? What do you like? What do you don't like? What works? What does not work? What do you think? Like some standard structured questions, and collect that from the community. So that gives you a picture, right? And then use this data, this aggregation, to see if you can actually corroborate what you're hearing in the interviews. And in some cases you can, because it goes the other way, right? The parents say, oh, my children read books all the time, and it's like, no, that's not what we see. Right? And again, it's not so much to support or say no, but to kind of see why is it that it agrees or disagrees. So that way, you don't have just one window into that space. You have multiple ways of looking at it, and then kind of see if it supports your practice.
Yeah, and if you can add one more piece to that toolbox, potentially, that could be useful. But again, I think it's useful to have a first draft and then get people to sort of discuss, change, whatever, iterate on it. I think that's a fairly good model.
Well, they have 45,000 laptops, so you should talk to them.
Yeah.
Who has 45,000?
Behind you.
Okay, that's a sufficient number.
Yes.
Board organization is yours.
Samara Foundation in Nicaragua. Yeah, Nicaragua.
So I think we'll stop that session for here. It's 3.
That sounds good. Thank you.
No worries.